What should we do? Jiuyu's beautiful eyes focused intently on Mu Chen, who looked slightly troubled. Clearly, both of them were shaken by the sudden distress signal, momentarily losing their composure. The 9 kings under the great Luo heaven domain, with their 9 legions, represented the core strength of the domain. Losing even one of them would severely impact its power. And the ongoing grand hunting war was brutal beyond imagination. To survive, every force had to be preserved as much as possible. So when Mu Chen and Jiuyu saw that a royal army was already in peril, barely a day into the grand hunting war, they were stunned. Mu Chen understood the arrogance of the kings. They were all elites within the great Luo heaven domain, and even in the northern domain, they were considered formidable. With their powerful armies, to force them into a position where they had to ask for help from the other kings meant they had truly reached a dead end. I wonder which king is asking for help. And who could have forced them into such a situation? Jiuyu tightened her grip slightly and spoke slowly. Mu Chen shook his head. The copper mirror could only signal for help and vaguely indicate the location. No other information could be transmitted. At this moment, all the top experts from major forces have already ventured deep into the fallen battlefield in search of the Earth's supreme treasure. So, if someone is able to force our royal armies into such a dire state, it must be another top-tier force, Mu Chen said calmly. And it's very likely they were ambushed and trapped. Jiuyu's beautiful eyes narrowed as she turned to Mu Chen and asked, "What do you plan to do then? If that's the case, a rash rescue could cost us everything as well." Mu Chen fell silent for a moment, then took a deep breath and said, "No matter how dangerous it is, we must go. We can't stand by and watch our royal forces get annihilated." Mandala also said that with just our strength alone, we might not be able to venture deep into the fallen battlefield. Jiuyu lightly nodded her head, clearly appreciating Mu Chen's resolve. Although all the kings were under the great Luo heaven domain, their relationships were often strained due to rivalry. For example, the relationship between the 9 Nether Palace and Blood Eagle Hall wasn't exactly friendly, and there was even some hostility. So for Mu Chen to decide to help at the first sign of distress was something Jiuyu admired greatly. Time is of the essence. Let's move. Mu Chen looked at Jiuyu. Then his gaze shifted to the prepared 9 nether guards. Without saying much, he waved his hand, and his figure shot into the sky. Behind him, Jiuyu and the 9 nether guards transformed into countless flashes of light, following closely. Whoosh! Time was pressing, so Mu Chen's army pushed their speed to the limit, racing toward the direction indicated by the copper mirror. Along the way, they encountered several forces, but everyone merely watched in surprise as the bloodthirsty 9 nether guards swept past. No one dared to stop them. After about an hour of intense travel, they gradually neared the area from which the distress signal originated. Soon after entering the area, Mu Chen and his group began to gather information, and their expressions turned extremely serious. Just as they had suspected, the force that had attacked their great Luo heaven domain was not only a top-tier force, but also the most powerful force in the northern domain. The Divine Hall. This massive entity, which had survived 5 grand hunting wars, was said to have the deepest foundation in the northern domain. Such an ancient and top-tier force was one that even the great Luo heaven domain would treat with caution. From the intelligence we've gathered, it seems the one in peril is likely Blood Eagle Hall, Jiuyu said, gazing at Mu Chen with a wry smile. She clearly hadn't expected the distress signal to come from the Blood Eagle Hall, a faction with which they had deep-seated animosity. In the great Luo heaven domain, the two forces were hardly on friendly terms and were even somewhat hostile. And the ones who pushed them into a corner are likely the Celestial Crocodile Army, led by the Lord of Alligator Mountain. The Lord of Alligator Mountain. Mu Chen frowned slightly. He was no longer a rookie unaware of the Northern Domain's top forces. He knew them well. The ruler of the Divine Hall was said to be the Divine Hall Master, and under him were the 4 Palace Masters of the East, West, South, and North. These were counterparts to the 3 Emperors of the Great Luo Heaven Domain. There's also an old rival, such a narrow road for enemies. Mu Chen looked into the distance and smiled helplessly. Among the powerful figures from the Divine Hall who had attacked the Bloodhawk Hall, not only was the Lord of Alligator Mountain present, but also an old acquaintance, Feng Yi from the Divine Hall, the man who had been forced to flee in embarrassment within Dragon Phoenix Heaven by Kai Xiao. Yet, he still stood firmly in the first position on the Dragon Phoenix record. Chen had a good relationship with Kai Xiao, but now that she had left, and with her identity as the daughter of the Flame Emperor, even if Fang Yi had 10 times the courage, he wouldn't dare to provoke her in the boundless fire domain. Therefore, he would inevitably direct his anger toward Chen. Chen could already imagine the fury on Fang Yi's face when he saw him. By then, a great battle would be unavoidable. Facing a genius who had dominated the Northern Domain's Dragon Phoenix record for many years, even though Chen had broken through to the 4th grade Supreme, he still couldn't claim that he could defeat him with certainty. Chen knew well that Fang Yi was no simple character, so as Chen advanced, Fang Yi would not remain stagnant. With the enormous resources of the Divine Hall, Fang Yi's cultivation speed and hidden trump cards would undoubtedly be impressive. After all, Chen was no peerless prodigy like Kai Xiao, who specialized in crushing super geniuses. Now, the Bloodhawk Hall has been forced into a deep valley hundreds of miles away, effectively surrounded. This event has caused quite a stir in the region, attracting the attention of many forces. After all, battles between top-tier forces are always quite intriguing. Nine Nether shrugged her fragrant shoulders. In this grand hunting war, when top forces started clashing, that was when things would get exciting and brutal. Now that the Great Luo Heaven Domain and the Divine Hall were facing off, it was unclear how many nerves it would stir. So, once this news spread, it was bound to attract countless attention. So it's that bastard Blood Eagle King. Should we still go? Nine Nether looked at Chen with some frustration. Qiu Shan and the others were also looking at him, waiting for him to make a decision. This idiot. Chen rubbed his forehead, unable to hold back a curse. He clearly felt conflicted, as the relationship between the Nine Nether Palace and the Bloodhawk Hall was far from good. If it were any other king, Chen would have acted without hesitation, but dealing with the Blood Eagle King left him truly troubled. Though I can't stand this guy, he's still a member of our Great Luo Heaven Domain. If we let them be destroyed by the Divine Hall, it wouldn't be good for us either. Chen finally took a deep breath, suppressing his resentment toward the Blood Eagle King, and said in a deep voice, "We can settle our grudge with them ourselves, but we won't rely on external forces like the Divine Hall. After saving them, if he dares to be impolite, I'll make sure he bows to us." Qiu Shan and the others looked at Chen, who now seemed filled with domineering aura. Their eyes couldn't help but shine with fervor. They knew that under Chen's command, the 9 Nether Guards were now far stronger than the Blood Eagle Guard. Chen had the ability and the qualifications to say such things. "Let's go." Chen looked at 9 Nether, who nodded gently. Then without hesitation, his figure shot into the sky, surrounded by flowing light. They arrived at a vast crimson valley, where the color appeared somewhat gloomy, as if covered in blood, giving off an oppressive feeling. In the center of this valley stood a large army, all dressed in blood-colored armor, their eyes sharp, though the overwhelming battle will that should have been gathered was now somewhat chaotic, clearly showing signs of severe damage. At the heart of this army, the Blood Eagle King, in his blood-colored armor, looked grimly toward the valley's edge, where the sky seemed filled with countless glowing figures floating in the air. A powerful battle will had sealed off the valley, leaving them no escape. "My lord, we've lost nearly 1,000 Blood Eagle Guards." Wu Tian, covered in blood, whispered from beside the Blood Eagle King. His previously cold expression was now filled with shame and pain. Hearing this, the Blood Eagle King's body trembled. Losing 1,000 Blood Eagle Guards was nearly 1/5 of their entire force. The resources and effort required to train them were unimaginable, yet they had been lost in less than half an hour. The Celestial Crocodile Army has now formed a blockade, sealing this area. "My lord, I will lead the Blood Eagle Guards to fight to the death and break through the blockade. Please leave as soon as possible." Wu Tian wiped the blood from his face. The Blood Eagle King's eyes hardened as he shouted, "Do you want this king to flee like a dog? How can I continue to stand in the Great Luo Heaven Domain if that happens? If they try to attack, you will charge with me." The face of the Blood Eagle King was filled with ferocity. The murderous intent that ran through his veins had clearly been triggered at this moment. "My lord, don't worry. We've sent out the distress signal. As long as we can delay a bit longer, reinforcements will arrive. Wu Tian saw the Blood Eagle King's intent to risk everything and hurriedly advised him. It's too late. The Blood Eagle King shook his head, his cold, murderous gaze fixed on the sky beyond the valley. The overwhelming battle intent from there was already beginning to press down on the valley. Clearly, the celestial crocodile army was about to attack. The Blood Eagle guards within the valley all felt the spreading battle intent and immediately gripped their long halberds, preparing for a fight to the death. Taking a deep breath, the Blood Eagle King clenched his hand, and a blood-red long halberd appeared in a flash. A powerful spiritual energy surged from his body. However, just as the Blood Eagle King was ready to fight to the death, his gaze suddenly sharpened. He noticed that the overwhelming battle intent from the celestial crocodile army outside the valley had suddenly fluctuated. "My lord, our reinforcements have arrived," Wu Tian exclaimed with joy. He sensed a similarly powerful battle intent quickly spreading toward them, clearly not belonging to the celestial crocodile army. "Which of the kings is it?" The Blood Eagle King's sharp gaze locked onto the distant horizon. His expression then became slightly complicated. After a moment of silence, he quietly said, "It's the 9 Nether King and Mu King." Beyond the valley, atop a steep lone peak, several figures stood with their hands clasped behind their backs. In the sky surrounding the peak, countless figures floated, an overwhelming battle intent surged like a tidal wave, almost filling the entire sky and earth. At a rough glance, the scale of the figures was enormous, numbering nearly 10,000. Such a force, even among the kings of the great Luo Heaven domain, would definitely rank among the top. With such a massive army gathered, the battle intent was incredibly powerful, to the point of being astonishing. The battle intent spread, completely enveloping the valley, forming a cage around it, trapping everyone inside. Even a fly wouldn't be able to escape. "My lord, the forces of the Bloodhawk Hall have been completely cornered in the valley. Once we launch the attack, we'll wipe them out completely." A figure dashed to the mountaintop, knelt midair, and respectfully cupped his fists. At the top of the mountain, 2 figures stood at the forefront. One was a familiar face to Mu Chun, Feng Yi, the man who had been forced to flee Dragon Phoenix Heaven by Kai Shao, but still managed to hold the top spot on the Dragon Phoenix record. Feng Yi, wearing a white robe, still looked graceful and unhurried. Despite the setback he had suffered that day, he didn't show any signs of dejection. Instead, his eyes were even brighter, clearly having grown stronger from his failure. After all, being favored by the Divine Hall showed his strong will and determination. He wouldn't have lost his fighting spirit after just one failure. If he had, the Divine Hall would have abandoned him long ago. With one hand behind his back, Feng Yi exuded an air of scholarly elegance. To anyone looking at him, it would be hard to imagine that he was the ruthless person who had claimed the #1 spot on the Dragon Phoenix record. Standing beside Feng Yi was another awe-inspiring powerhouse. This man, of middle age, had a presence that was the complete opposite of Feng Yi's refinement. He emanated a chilling aura of brutality, his eyes as fierce as a wild beast's, radiating a murderous air that would make anyone nearby feel intimidated. This man was wearing dark, battle armor, with the image of an ancient ferocious crocodile etched onto it. The beast's feet were stomping on a mountain, radiating fierce energy. He was none other than Su Ba, the Lord of Alligator Mountain, one of the 10 mountain lords of the Divine Hall. Su Ba nodded after hearing his subordinate's report. His fierce gaze remained fixed on the distant valley, a cruel smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "The Bloodhawk Hall dares to fight us for the ruins. They really overestimate themselves. The Blood Eagle Guards want to challenge the Celestial Crocodile Army? They're truly out of their league." Feng Yi, standing beside him, smiled faintly. His gaze swept over the surrounding sky and earth, where groups of soldiers were constantly arriving, drawn in by the news of the battle between the Divine Hall and the Great Luo Heaven Domain. After all, the confrontation between 2 top forces would inevitably create great ripples, no matter the outcome. If Lord Su can truly wipe out the Bloodhawk Hall, it will certainly be a significant military achievement, and your name will definitely spread far and wide during this grand hunting war," Feng Yi said with a smile. Su Ba grinned in response, though his smile was full of vicious intent. I owe that to you. Although the Blood Eagle Hall is currently trapped like a cornered beast, Lord Su still needs to be cautious. The Blood Eagle King is a peak-level 5th grade supreme. If he fights desperately, it could be tricky, Fang Yi reminded. 5th grade supreme peak. Su Ba sneered, a disdainful curve at the corner of his mouth. With this level of strength, he's nothing more than the lowest among the 10 mountain lords. To escape from my hands, the Blood Eagle King doesn't have that ability. Though his words were dismissive, Su Ba clearly did not intend to drag things out. He raised his hand, ready to order the attack and completely wipe out the Blood Eagle guards. Buzz. However, just as his hand was about to come down, both his and Fang Yi's expressions suddenly changed. They turned their heads sharply toward the northwest, where the sky trembled. An overwhelming battle intent, like a storm, quickly swept toward them. The hidden forces in this world also took notice at this moment. Countless shocked gazes were cast in that direction. Clearly, they were surprised. After all, everyone knew that this was the time of the confrontation between the Divine Hall and the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Ordinary forces wouldn't dare interfere, lest they attract disaster. Whoosh, whoosh. Under the countless gazes of those present, a dark light curtain suddenly appeared at the edge of the distant sky. Within the vast light curtain, innumerable dark figures whizzed by. A tremendous battle intent spread from them, like wind and thunder, crashing into the world with a mighty force, overwhelming all. Who dares to interfere in the affairs of my divine hall? Su Ba's gaze sharpened as he looked at the dark army rushing toward them. Sensing the immense battle intent, he immediately shouted, his voice booming like thunder across the land. Who? Outside the valley, the celestial crocodile army, numbering close to 10,000, roared in unison. A terrifying battle intent soared into the sky, causing the wind and clouds to change, and the earth to tremble. Under such battle intent, even a 6th grade supreme would have to retreat. However, the black torrent-like army that was charging toward them stood motionless. A slender figure suddenly appeared in front of them. The young man laughed loudly, his clear laughter resonating. Great Luo Heaven Domain, 9 Nether Palace. 9 Nether Palace. All the 9 Nether Guard soldiers' eyes shone brightly. Their vast battle intent surged like waves, their roars like thunder, rolling endlessly. It immediately overwhelmed the battle intent brought by the celestial crocodile army, scattering it completely. The battle intent from the two forces spread across half of the sky, causing the heavens themselves to shake. Cracks began to spread from the point of collision. 9 Nether Palace? Su Ba's eyes flashed as he looked surprised. Based on what he knew, the 9 Nether Palace was always ranked at the bottom among the 9 kings of the Great Luo Heaven Domain. But now, seeing the situation, it seemed even more formidable than the Blood Eagle Hall. Besides Su Ba, Fang Yi, who had been indifferent, frowned. His deep gaze locked on the slender figure at the forefront of the 9 Nether Guards. He said lightly, Lord Su, your information is outdated. This person is the 10th king of the Great Luo Heaven Domain, Chen. Now, the 9 Nether Palace has 2 kings, making it unique in the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Chen. Su Ba was slightly stunned, then laughed and said, So it's that young brat who's been making waves in the Northern Domain recently. Just as the words left his mouth, his expression turned vicious. He stared coldly at Chen's figure in the distance, sneering, A brat who's barely out of his diapers dares to come and rescue people? He truly doesn't know his limits. Su Ba's voice echoed through the world, drawing the attention of numerous forces. Curious gazes were now turned toward Chen. It seemed they had all heard this familiar name recently. Chen stood in midair with the 9 Nether Guards. Hearing Su Ba's mocking laugh, his beautiful eyes chilled. A vast spiritual force surged in his jade-like hands. Let me guess, you must be the Lord of Alligator Mountain? Chen smiled faintly, glancing at the fierce-looking Su Ba, then at Fang Yi beside him. He clasped his hands and said, Greetings. Brat, don't try to cozy up to me. Get lost, or I'll deal with you along with the rest of them. Su Ba, however, was unyielding, his voice filled with mockery and cruelty. It was clear he did not take Chen and the 9 Nether Palace seriously. Chen, hearing this, could only rub his nose and smile. Don't know how to live or die, Su Ba said coldly. With a wave of his sleeve, 5,000 celestial crocodile army soldiers separated from the battle formation, roaring low as their bloodthirsty battle intent soared into the sky. In Su Ba's view, the 9 Nether Guard only numbered around 5,000. Sending out the same number of celestial crocodile soldiers to deal with them would be enough. After all, earlier, the Blood Eagle Guard had clashed with the celestial crocodile army, and in just a brief moment, they had been utterly defeated. His main priority now was to finish off the remaining Blood Eagle Guard in the valley. Once that was done, he would turn his attention to destroying the 9 Nether Palace as well. Boom, boom. The celestial crocodile army howled across the sky. Their dark red, overwhelming battle intent roared like a blood sea, and as the battle intent surged, it transformed into millions of giant spears, raining down on the direction of the 9 Nether Guard. Such a display would annihilate even a 5th grade Supreme without a doubt. However, Chen only lifted his head and calmly gazed at the thousands of battle spears roaring toward him. Then, he smiled faintly and said, "It seems you underestimate our 9 Nether Guard." He gently raised his hand and let it fall. Boom. A black tidal wave erupted from the 9 Nether Guard, as if a volcano had exploded. The massive 9 Nether battle intent condensed and transformed into an enormous, pitch-black light wing. The edges of the wing radiated a sharp light, enough to tear space apart. Whoosh! Chen flicked his finger, and the black light wing vanished. No one could see clearly, only witnessing a streak of light cutting across the sky. Wherever it passed, the countless battle spears shattered almost instantly, turning into scattered dots of light. It was a destructive force, as if withering everything in its path. Whoosh! The streak of light zipped through the shocked gazes of the heavens and earth, finally crossing over the celestial crocodile army and striking the battle barrier that enveloped the valley in the distance. Crack! At the moment of impact, the battle barrier formed from the celestial crocodile army's battle intent shattered like fragile glass. With the collapse of the barrier, the Blood Eagle Guard in the valley was revealed. But at this moment, they stood there in stunned silence, clearly having witnessed the terrifying strike of the 9 Nether Guard. Su Ba's face changed drastically as he watched this, and even Feng Yi, who had always remained calm beside him, couldn't help but narrow his pupils, clearly shocked by the overwhelming battle intent of the 9 Nether Guard. Who could have predicted that the battle intent of the mere 5,009 Nether Guard could be so terrifying? Amidst the countless astonished gazes, Chen smiled faintly. He looked toward the grim-faced Su Ba, his laughter echoing across the heavens, but no one dared to disregard him any longer. "I wonder if we can have a proper discussion now." Chen's voice spread across the land. Though his tone was calm, combined with the terrifying battle intent that surrounded him, no one dared to belittle him. Even someone as strong as Su Ba felt his pupils contract slightly, and his gaze became colder as he stared at Chen, slowly saying, "I didn't expect that at your young age, you could control battle intent to this level. I underestimated you." Chen smiled without commenting. He glanced at the Blood Eagle Guard, trapped in the valley, and said, "Su Mountain Lord, if we engage in a direct battle now, it wouldn't be good for either side. If you truly intend to forcibly swallow the Blood Eagle Hall, I'm afraid you'll have to pay a hefty price. Therefore, I suggest you lift the siege. Regardless of the outcome today, we will settle this properly in the future in the great Luo Heaven Domain. How about it?" In the vast sky, the young man stood in midair, smiling calmly. Despite the celestial crocodile army glaring at him, there was no trace of fear on his youthful face. His composed demeanor and aura drew the attention of countless forces across the world. Su Ba was also somewhat surprised by Chen's calmness, but he couldn't help but laugh bitterly at Chen's words. Although the overwhelming battle demonstrated by the 9 Nether Guard earlier took him by surprise, it only proved that the 9 Nether Guard had the qualification to engage in a direct battle with the same number of celestial crocodile army. However, the current situation is quite different. He commands an entire force of 10,000 celestial crocodile soldiers, while the 9 Nether Guard only has 5,000. If a battle were to break out, the 9 Nether Guard would inevitably suffer a crushing defeat. Therefore, Su Ba found the price mentioned by Chen to be quite laughable. In the valley, the Blood Eagle King and all the Blood Eagle Guard troops gazed at the sky in the distance. The standoff between the Nine Nether Guard and the Celestial Crocodile Army filled their eyes with complex emotions. They all clearly felt that, compared to a year ago, the Nine Nether Guard had undergone a profound transformation, as if they had been reborn. My lord, given the strength of Nine Nether Palace, they may not be able to handle the Celestial Crocodile Army. Wu Tian hesitated and said softly. Although he was conflicted about Nine Nether Palace's potential assistance, what he said was the truth. They had fought the Celestial Crocodile Army before and were well aware of how formidable the enemy was. Although the Nine Nether Guard had greatly improved since then, compared to the Celestial Crocodile Army, they were still somewhat lacking in strength and depth. In Wu Tian's opinion, only the Xun'er Guard, led by the Xun'er King, or the Mountain-Splitting Legion, led by the Mountain-Splitting King, both among the most elite forces, could defeat the Celestial Crocodile Army. At this moment, the Nine Nether Guard still seemed a little unprepared for the challenge. The Blood Eagle King nodded upon hearing this. Looking at the standoff in the sky, he said, Wu Tian, if the Nine Nether Guard makes a move, you will lead the Blood Eagle Guard to fully support them and relieve some of their pressure. As for Su Ba, I will act with all my might to prevent him from managing the situation. Wu Tian nodded in agreement. Given the current circumstances, their only hope of breaking through the Celestial Crocodile Army's blockade was to work together with all their strength. As they spoke, in the high skies, Mu Chen, facing Su Ba's sarcastic words, narrowed his eyes slightly. It seemed that Su Ba, believing he had the advantage in numbers, still underestimated the Nine Nether Guard. If that's the case, Mu Chen's hands suddenly formed a seal, and his previously calm eyes began to fill with sharpness. A fierce aura, like a sword being drawn from its sheath, began to emanate from his body. Nine Nether Guard, Mu Chen shouted, his voice booming. Fight! Countless Nine Nether Guard soldiers slammed their long spears into the ground, roaring like thunder. The black, surging battle intent soared into the sky, resembling an immense black ocean, filling the heavens and earth. With a cry, Mu Chen stamped his foot, and the overwhelming black battle intent surged behind him. Immediately, the battle intent surged violently, and the sound of a crane's call, full of intense battle will, echoed through the air. Then, countless people saw a giant Nine Nether Sparrow, engraved with battle marks, materialize from the turbulent battle intent. It spread its massive wings, instantly blotting out the sky. The Nine Nether Sparrow let out a long cry, and everyone was horrified to see the black battle intent shoot up into the sky like a waterfall. In just a few breaths, the entire world seemed to be enveloped in that vast battle intent. Spirit of battle will. Shocked exclamations rang out almost simultaneously across the battlefield. The faces of the various forces changed dramatically as they stared at the scene, their eyes wide with disbelief. Mu Chen actually manifested the spirit of battle will of the Nine Nether Guard. In the valley, the Blood Eagle King and Wu Tian also froze, staring at the scene. They exchanged glances and involuntarily took a sharp breath. At this moment, they finally understood why Mu Chen and the Nine Nether Guard dared to come here alone, knowing the Celestial Crocodile Army was already present. It turned out that they truly had absolute confidence. Because everyone understood just how terrifying the enhancement effect that the spirit of battle will could have on an army. This guy, Wu Tian's eyes were filled with complexity. He sighed deeply. A year ago, when Mu Chen first entered the great Luo Heaven domain, Wu Tian didn't take him seriously at all. But now, a year later, Mu Chen not only ranked third on the Dragon Phoenix record, but even the army he commanded had grown so powerful that Wu Tian could no longer compare. At times like this, even Wu Tian had to admit that the gap between him and Mu Chen was immeasurable. Some people, even when once nameless and dormant, were destined to astonish the world. Su Ba's eyes were fixed, just as firmly as the Nine Nether Sparrow within the overwhelming battle will. His face turned pale, the realization dawning on him that Mu Chen's trump card had far surpassed his expectations. At this moment, he finally understood why Mu Chen dared to speak of paying a price. It wasn't youthful arrogance, it was because he truly possessed such a means. The Nine Nether Guard, imbued with the battle spirit, although fewer in number than the Celestial Crocodile Army, still left Su Ba uncertain about his ability to defeat them. He was well aware of the immense importance of the battle spirit to an army. Besides Su Ba, Fang Yi furrowed his brows, his first serious gaze directed at Mu Chen. He had never thought highly of Mu Chen before, despite his stunning performance in Dragon Phoenix Heaven. Fang Yi had known that if it weren't for encountering a prodigy like Kai Xiao, Mu Chen's brilliance in Dragon Phoenix Heaven would have been easily overshadowed by him. But now, it seemed he had underestimated the opponent he once dismissed. Someone who could forge the battle spirit in an army. Fang Yi knew just how great the potential and threat such a person possessed. Su Ba's expression darkened, and he glared viciously at Mu Chen, his voice cold and sharp. Do you really think that with the battle spirit, you can stand against my celestial crocodile army? Today, I'll see just how powerful this battle spirit truly is. Although Su Ba understood the power of the battle spirit, asking him to retreat was something he could not tolerate. Even though he knew that once a battle began, the consequences would be severe. At this moment, Fang Yi reached out to stop the bloodthirsty Su Ba, looking at Mu Chen with a faint smile. Mu Chen, you've truly surprised us. You're too kind, Mu Chen replied with a nonchalant smile. If you two don't want to engage in a deadly struggle and let other forces profit from this, I think the best choice is for both sides to take a step back. Fang Yi smiled, speaking slowly. If that's the case, you clearly don't dare to fight the celestial crocodile army to the death, because you know the 9 Nether Guard will suffer heavy losses as well. Since you have your own reservations, do you really think you can just walk away with your people without consequences? Mu Chen squinted his eyes slightly. Are you trying to see who among us is more ruthless? Fang Yi waved his hand and smiled. There's no need for pointless cruelty. You should also understand that if we let you take your people away easily, it would be a blow to the face of our divine hall. So what do you intend to do? Mu Chen raised an eyebrow, smiling at the domineering figure from the Dragon Phoenix record. Fang Yi smiled, glanced at Su Ba, and said, Su Shan Master, how about I take charge of the situation from here? Su Ba pondered for a moment and nodded. Fang Yi's position within the divine hall was unique. Though still young, his future achievements would undoubtedly be considerable. Therefore, Su Ba had no objection to his involvement. Moreover, with the 9 Nether Palaces' appearance, the situation had indeed become more complicated, and Su Ba was quite willing to let Fang Yi handle it. Seeing Su Ba's agreement, Fang Yi turned his gaze back to Mu Chen, smiling. You must understand that a military conflict would come at great cost to both sides. But if you want to rescue someone, relying solely on words won't help. So, Mu Chen tilted his head slightly, smiling at Fang Yi. I've seen your performance in Dragon Phoenix Heaven, and it was indeed impressive. But considering how dazzling your results are, it must be closely tied to your friend, Fang Yi said slowly, extending his palm. His fingertips glowed with spiritual power, crackling with dangerous energy that began to spread. I have a method to resolve this situation with minimal cost, but I wonder if you have the courage to try it. Mu Chen's gaze sharpened. Fang Yi smiled gently, but deep within his eyes, an inscrutable and profound light flickered. That is, challenge me. That is, challenge me. Fang Yi stood on the mountaintop, one hand behind his back. The wind brushed past him, causing his white robe to flutter. His poised and elegant demeanor earned quiet admiration from all the forces in the surroundings. Even though he had encountered setbacks in Dragon Phoenix Heaven due to Kai Zhao's appearance, he did not let this defeat him. Instead, he used it to reflect on himself, and his strength even improved once again. This resilience, to seek breakthroughs in adversity, would surely earn admiration from anyone. This is the essential quality of becoming a true powerhouse. Under the gaze of countless eyes in the world, Fang Yi smiled slightly, his gaze directed towards Mu Chen, who was standing high in the sky. He said, If you can defeat me, my divine hall will retreat voluntarily today. A ripple of astonishment spread through the crowd, as Fang Yi's words clearly signified a challenge to Mu Chen. This moment immediately attracted the attention of many forces, as both of them were considered among the hottest figures of the younger generation in the Northern Domain. One had stood as the leader of the Dragon Phoenix record for many years, while the other was a super dark horse who had rapidly risen like a comet in the Northern Domain. Both had considerable fame, so their confrontation was bound to attract many eyes. Everyone was eager to see whether Mu Chen, the recent rising star in the northern domain, would continue his ascent after meeting the leader of the Dragon Phoenix record, or if he would fall into obscurity. However, in terms of status and fame, Fang Yi clearly had the upper hand. Some stronger forces even felt that Fang Yi's challenge was not entirely fair, given that when his name had resounded throughout the northern domain, Mu Chen was still an unknown figure. Do you really think you can choose the way to start the battle here? Jiao Yu's beautiful eyes glinted coldly, sneering. With her strength, she could naturally tell that Fang Yi had already reached the 5th grade supreme. If a battle broke out, even she would find it troublesome. As for Mu Chen, he was only a 4th grade supreme, so a direct confrontation would not be favorable for him. If you want to fight, the Celestial Crocodile Army will accompany you to the end. But I'm afraid that when the time comes, less than half of your 5,000 Jiu guards will remain alive. Su Ba also spoke coldly, his voice full of sinister killing intent. Then the Celestial Crocodile Army will be buried with them. Jiu retorted icily. Fang Yi smiled and stopped Su Ba from speaking further. He then turned his gaze back to Mu Chen and said, "You're very smart. You should be able to see the situation clearly. The fact that you've managed to cultivate battle spirit with the Jiu guards is indeed impressive, but the number of your guards is still at a disadvantage. If a battle really breaks out, the result will be mutual destruction." At this point, Fang Yi gestured to the forces gathered around them and smiled. "And you're well aware of how many wolves in sheep's clothing are hidden among these people. If it comes to that, it won't benefit either of us. Therefore, the best outcome now is to turn the army battle into a personal one." Mu Chen looked at Fang Yi, who was smiling, and also smiled back. "You speak so grandly, but I can see the killing intent in your eyes. I think you've suddenly developed a murderous intent toward me, haven't you?" Fang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Mu Chen had clearly seen through his thoughts. At first, he had not considered Mu Chen as someone of his level. However, after witnessing Mu Chen's ability to cultivate battle spirit with the Jiu guards, he was forced to change his mind. He began to feel Mu Chen's potential and the threat it posed. If Mu Chen were allowed to continue growing, he would undoubtedly become a major enemy of their divine hall. And such an enemy must be eliminated before he fully matured. "If you're afraid to fight, I can understand that," Fang Yi said lightly. "After all, you're a newcomer. Reaching this point at your age is already impressive, and even I must admit that. Your provocation is not very clever," Mu Chen said with a smile. Fang Yi furrowed his brows slightly. He had finally realized how troublesome Mu Chen was. This young man, though not very old, had a mind that was sharp and mature, showing no trace of the typical youthful desire to compete. His unflappable demeanor made Fang Yi feel somewhat unsettled. But, just as Fang Yi frowned, Mu Chen smiled and said, "If you really want to challenge me, it's not impossible. It's actually quite simple. 500 fallen source pills." Mu Chen extended 5 fingers and shook them with a smile. The previously tense atmosphere in the world seemed to freeze for a moment. No one expected that Mu Chen would say something as close to blackmail at this moment, especially when the reason for it was so absurd it was almost laughable. 500 fallen source pills. Su Ba, upon hearing this, also let out a bitter laugh in anger. He glared at Mu Chen, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Kid, do you think your life is worth 500 fallen source pills?" It was absurd. 500 fallen source pills were nearly all of their current harvests, and that was only because they had been lucky enough to find a few ancient ruins first and had painstakingly refined them. Yet this Mu Chen, after just one strike, dared to ask for 500 pills? Who did he think he was? "Whether it's worth it or not, it's not up to you," Mu Chen replied, still smiling as he looked at the somewhat stiff-faced Fang Yi. He extended his palm and said, "Brother Fang Yi, if you really want to kill me, this is a small price to pay. Of course, if you think this method won't work." At this point, Mu Chen's smile vanished instantly, and a cold, murderous glint appeared in his black eyes, carrying an intent to kill. "Then let's settle it with a direct confrontation between our armies. Let's see if your Celestial Crocodile Army can make my 9 Nether Guard pay a heavy price." His voice was suddenly filled with killing intent, causing the temperature in the air to drop noticeably. His change in demeanor took many powerful experts by surprise, making them realize that the seemingly gentle young man before them might have a fierce tiger hidden deep within his bones. Once his fundamentals were touched, his gentleness would be replaced by sharp, cold, killing intent. Su Ba's expression changed, and he was about to explode in rage, but Fang Yi once again stopped him. The latter's eyes, cold as ice, fixed on Mu Chen as he slowly spoke. Mu Chen, what's the point of doing this? Some things, even if they're in your hands, you can't take with you. 500, not one less. Give them, and we fight. Don't, and we go to war. Mu Chen waved his hand with a smile, his demeanor so nonchalant that Su Ba's face twitched, unable to hold back his anger, as if he wished he could tear Mu Chen apart. At the side, Nine Nether couldn't help but chuckle lightly, but then shot a resentful glance at Mu Chen. It was clear she was a bit exasperated by how he had turned what was supposed to be a fair challenge into an atmosphere of pay up before fighting. Fang Yi stared at Mu Chen, the coldness in his eyes growing rapidly. However, in the end, he didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled calmly. Since you insist, then so be it. Su Shan Master, if you would be so kind. Fang Yi turned his gaze to Su Ba. Su Ba's face twitched, clearly feeling pained. After all, 500 fallen source pills were almost all they had earned so far. If they handed them over, it would all be for nothing. They can't escape, Fang Yi said slowly. Upon hearing this, Su Ba gritted his teeth, and with a wave of his sleeve, 500 fallen source pills shot out, flying toward Mu Chen amid the envious gazes of countless onlookers. After all, at this point, 500 fallen source pills were enough to make countless forces covet them. Mu Chen clenched his hand, and the 500 fallen source pills floated around him. He gave them a quick glance, then smiled as he put them away. Brother Fang, you're quite generous. Fang Yi smiled calmly. It's no trouble, just temporarily storing them with you. Later, I'll take them back with interest. Mu Chen nodded slightly. I hope so. Isn't this a bit risky? Nine Nether whispered. Clearly, Fang Yi was confident enough to throw out 500 fallen source pills, signaling that he had enough certainty to deal with Mu Chen. At this moment, making a move didn't seem like the most prudent choice. If we go to war, we will indeed suffer some losses that I'm unwilling to bear, Mu Chen said softly. Just as Fang Yi said, if a battle broke out, even if Nine Nether Guard won, there would still be casualties. However, Mu Chen knew that the cost would be less than what Fang Yi suggested, but he still wasn't willing to bear it. Thus, turning a potential battle into a duel between two heroes aligned with Mu Chen's thoughts. However, before that, he had no problem making Fang Yi and his people suffer a bit, while also making them uncomfortable. Nine Nether silently nodded. She understood that to rescue Blood Eagle Hall from the Divine Hall, mere intimidation wouldn't work. However, Fang Yi was no easy opponent either. He had been the true ruler on the Northern Domain's Dragon Phoenix record for years. Even though Mu Chen's strength had grown significantly, no one, not even the Nine Nether, could guarantee he could match Fang Yi. After putting away the fallen source pills, Mu Chen stepped out slowly. His black eyes began to sharpen, and an aura radiated from his body, growing fierce, like a divine spear unsheathed. Fang Yi sensed the intense aura coming from Mu Chen, and his eyelids twitched slightly. I want this brat's head. Su Ba gritted his teeth, clearly furious at Mu Chen for consuming 500 of his fallen source pills. As you wish. He will die today. Fang Yi smiled faintly. With a sudden movement, he stepped into the air, and in the blink of an eye, appeared right in front of Mu Chen. Countless gazes from all directions gathered on them.